Power is transferred to a central authority or sovereign that is the total community. Major decisions are made by a vote by all, in which Rousseau calls a plebiscite. That is something like a town meeting without the benefit of debate. The legislator proposes laws but does not decide on them. The legislator is a person or an intellectual elite body that works out carefully worded alternatives, brings people together, and has people vote with the results binding on all. The authority of the legislator derives from his superior insight, charisma, virtue, and mysticism. The legislator words the propositions of the plebiscite so that the right decision will result. The right decisions are those that change human nature. The unlimited power of the state is made to appear legitimate by the apparent consent of the majority. Between plebiscites, the government, i.e. the bureaucracy, governs by decree. The government interprets the laws and settles each case based on the perceived merits, both executive and judicial. The government is a bureaucracy with huge discretionary powers. The legislator is over and above this bureaucracy. In a total democracy, the real government is the bureaucracy that applies the law to day-to-day situations. Rousseau was an advocate of the ancient idea of the omnipotence of the lawgiver. Rulers are in some way attuned to the dictates of the general will and able to incorporate these dictates into specific laws. No one can challenge these laws because their source is the wise and beneficent general will. Rousseau permits no disobedience to the general will once his decisions have been made. Man's will must be subordinated, and he must abide by the general will, even though he thinks he disagrees with it. The person who disagrees with the general will must be mistaken. According to Rousseau, each person wants to be good and therefore would want to obey the general will. It follows that when a person disagrees with the general will, he would actually be acting contrary to his own basic desires, and that it would be proper to use force to attain his agreement with the general will. The general will reflects the real will of each member of society. By definition, the general will is always right. The general will, if we all agree on something, then that's the general will. So, I'm not saying it's wrong or right. This is his idea of government. His state of nature and how to educate people, bar none, is 100% right. And so we should consider how he thinks that society should be governed. So the general will is always right. The general will is the overriding good to which each person is willing to sacrifice all other goods, including all particular private wills. The good citizen assigns to society's laws of goodness and wisdom exceeding his own goodness and wisdom. It is therefore quite possible to have a conflict between what a person thinks that he wills and that which he truly wills. The good citizen is able to identify his own will with the general will. If the general will is supreme, then citizens are free only to obey in equal servitude. People who refuse to comply with the general will can be forced to comply. If people want to be good, the rulers can make them be good. Rousseau thus viewed the political community as the proper means for liberating men from their mistaken perceptions and from the conflicts and corruptions of society. Rousseau's idea of the general will is related to the organic concept of the state as not merely real, but more real than the individuals who live within its bounds. What matters is the whole of which the individual is a part. The individual person and his own ideas, values, and goals mean nothing by regarding human beings as means to higher ends rather than an end in themselves. Rousseau greatly contributed to the intellectual collectivization of man. It was a small step to Hegel's contention that the general will is the will of the state, and that the state is the earthly manifestation of the absolute. Furthermore, there was an easy transition from Hegel's political philosophy to the totalitarian systems of Marx and Hitler. Rulers who followed Rousseau's philosophy were able to demonstrate a vibrant but deceptive humanitarianism. They expressed love for humanity while at the same time crushing those who disagreed with the general will. For example, during the French Revolution, individuals like Robespierre were given enormous power to express the general will. Of course, dictators like Robespierre turned the general will into an expression of their own wills. Likewise, today when politicians refer to the good or aim of society, they are almost always referring to the good or aim of an individual or collection of individuals who want to impose their own vision upon others. On education from nature. Now, I think that Rousseau is probably saying that his will should trump everybody's because he's right. And in a way, he was, he's a unicorn. He's a very unique person in this time period. And he's sitting there, like, looking at all this bullshit and all these fucking crazy-ass people. And he's like, look, we need to start getting along with each other. We need to start cooperating and treating each other good. There's people that's starving on the street. When he wrote on education, the meal on education, half the kids would die. half the kids would die. The girls were being sent to some sort of convent, and the boys were being taught by the church or by the state. Probably the church, and so they were being formed to be men and women at a very young age, and so they never got a chance to actually be children, to enjoy the childhood, to enjoy life, to enjoy what it is that life had given them. Instead, they were told to shut up, sit down, do as they're told, and so their natural goodness was destroyed in the very beginning. And so when you see something like that, and you see all these children, all these kids dying, for him to say, well, if I was the sovereign king, that's what Plato said too, the philosopher king, which is, that's ironic, right? He's a philosopher and he dreams of a philosopher king. But I think there's something to that. A thoughtful person, a person who sort of thinks more than just themselves. I was reading in Habits of the Heart the difference between an oligarchy and an establishment. And the establishment is one who taxes themselves more than everybody else because they want the betterment of society. They do what they do for the betterment of society, whereas an oligarchy wants more for themselves and less for everybody else. And so the establishment, they quote the founding fathers and then the subsequent generation, the subsequent leaders of America after World War II. Dwight D. Eisenhower had a 90% tax rate, and that was, they taxed themselves the most because they wanted the rest of society to do well. Okay, so on education from nature, and then this completes this little talk. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau maintained that the state must control all schooling because the objective of schooling is to develop citizens who want only what the community, i.e. the general will, wants. I don't exactly agree with... Okay, well, that's sort of Hitler-esque, right? Because if you just force the kids, and that's the Prussian industrial education system, which is the American education system, you fashion their will to be the will that, society or you personally want. So just shut your mouth, go do your job, and, let me keep my power and keep my wealth. Don't you object and don't you question my authority. That's what, that's what I see today. So I don't know. I think it could go, depending on the benevolence of the dictator, it could go one way or another. And that's why I really err on the side of Sudbury schools, which say complete freedom. So there is no direction. There is no guide by the side. It's you guide yourself, and we're here if you want some help. But essentially, we're not going to tell you what to do at all. Use your freedom to figure out what it is you want, what you think is best in this world. So, because mankind was infinitely perfectible, human failings could be eradicated by education. Rousseau wants to mold and socialize the individual through universal public education. He wants to make men more docile, to believe that when they are obeying the law, they are only obeying themselves. According to Rousseau, obeying the law is always in one's own interest, the interest of one's higher self, not the self who wants to be made an exception. In Rousseau's educational system, a child would explore nature and its requirements in order to learn what he needs to know. The child would have a tutor who would secretly devise situations in which nature would teach what the tutor wants it to teach. Believing that he was free, Emile, the student, would equate his will with the mentor's will. This would serve to condition him to equate his own will with the general will. Rousseau, like Plato before him in Man and Dewey, Horne's Man, John Dewey, Democracy, the father of public education, believed in the perfectibility of man, provided that he was educated so that he could not want to do evil. And Emile Rousseau portrays the ideal education in the story of a child who, free from the restrictions of an adult's will, is able to study nature and thus learn what he needs to know. However, Emile has an enlightened tutor whose purpose is to secretly manufacture the conditions under which nature will teach the student what the tutor wants the student to learn. Through the tutor's disguised intentions, the student, by equating his own will with the will of his tutor, is conditioned to identify his own will with the general will. So I think this article actually touches on many of the truths. I think it's a slam. He's trying to fuck up Rousseau's entire argument. But Unfortunately, your enemies tell you more truth about yourselves than anybody else. So what is important with this is that which he concedes. And so he says that you don't want the child to be evil. So Rousseau says, how do you stop them from being evil? He says, well, just make them strong. If you make them strong, then why would they want to do evil? They are capable of doing anything in the world. Why would they want to go around hurting people? So the noble savage, right? You're strong. You're capable of doing everything. Why go around hurting people? Well, maybe they still want to do that. Well, they need to choose good. And he did actually say one rule. The child has complete freedom in the meal except for one rule. Do no harm to others. And that's something that society hasn't learned. Now, why would I want to be a public school teacher to engage in the oppression and exploitation of children? Why do I want to make children slaves? I don't. I want to liberate them. I want to teach democracy and teach them how to cooperate with each other and how to get along with one another. What a missed opportunity we have with public education. And instead of actually making the American people strong and capable, instead of doing that, we are telling them to shut up and sit down and listen to their massa and making them intellectual slaves. We need to liberate ourselves and liberate everybody else. That is the way to live life. The more people you can save, the better off your life will be. This is dying slowly. So essentially, Emile is right. This guy is wrong. But he tripped on some truths that the enlightened tutor will secretly manufacture. So you give them complete freedom, but can you not control their environment? Can you not suggest, hey, would you like to be a doctor? Would you like to be a lawyer? Would you like to be an engineer, a mechanic? Would you like to do things and create stuff and invent things and better off mankind? That's positive suggestion, positive reinforcements. That's the proper way to educate. That's the best way to educate. Then once you have that wild child, then you try to assimilate them into society. But 0 to 12, they're free to do as they wish, as they please, to find out who they are, their ambitions, their likes, dislikes, discover as they please. Complete freedom. Complete freedom. And then once they know what a man is or what a person is and what complete freedom feels like, they will know about anybody else that tries to take that freedom away from them.